There are stories in many ancient civilizations that are similar in nature. And when you hear stories from different parts of the world that are similar, it makes you wonder if something like it really happened. Because you can go to China, ancient China, and there is a story in some places about a flood, a deluge, if you will, that covered the whole world. And if you travel thousands of miles south of China into India, there are some ancient people that have a story about a flood that covered the whole world. If you study the ancient Middle East and look at Samaria, possibly the oldest piece of literature that we have is the Epic of Gilgamesh. You should study that in English. And if you read the entire Epic of Gilgamesh, there is a portion there, a small portion, that talks about a flood that encompassed the whole world. If you go to some of the ancient European societies, they have stories about a flood that conquered the whole world. If you go to ancient Egypt and look at their mythology, there is a story there about a flood that encompassed the whole world. If you go all the way across the oceans to the place that we now call Peru, to the ancient civilization of the Incas, there is a story in their mythology about a flood that covered the whole world. If you go to North America, to the indigenous peoples of North America, there was a group of people that lived in the southeastern part of what we now call the United States. They were called the Choctaw. And they have a story about a flood that covered the whole world. Some people call them myths. Some people call them legends. But when you hear stories like that from all over the world, it makes me think a little bit. I wonder if this could be true. And what makes me wonder even more is the fact that I have been to places like Colorado, which is in the middle of the North American continent. I have been skiing at some of the ski resorts in the Rocky Mountains. And in some of those places, they found fossils of fish and sea creatures. And it makes me wonder, could there have been water on top of the Rocky Mountains? If you go to the Andes Mountains down in South America, which I have, there are places in those mountains where they have found fossils of fish and sea creatures. If you go to the Himalayas, which are the largest mountain chain in the world, it is called the top of the world. There are places there that they have found fossils of fish and sea creatures. And geologists and anthropologists will tell you that they're just stories, and they have an alternate explanation. And if you listen to them, they will tell you that it took eons of time, millions of years, and what used to be high is now low, and what used to be low is now high. And the mountaintops now, they used to be part of ocean basins. And they will tell you these stories, and they make some sense. But when I look at the actual evidence, and when I hear these stories, these ancient stories from everywhere in the world that talk about a worldwide flood, it leads me to something else that is a philosophical construct that is called Occam's razor. William of Occam lived in the Middle Ages, in the 1300s, and he came up with this principle that says this: if you have two theories that are trying to explain the same phenomena, it will always be the simplest of the two that is true. And so I have one theory that is propounded by archaeologists and anthropologists and geologists that talk about all this time and all these million years, and how what once was a mountain is now an ocean, and what once was the ocean is now the mountains, and it's convoluted and it's hard to understand. And that's one theory. And then I have another theory that says at one time there was a universal flood that covered the whole earth. And according to Occam's razor, that is the most simple of explanations, and therefore that is the one that is probably true. Was there a worldwide flood? If you believe there is a God that created this universe, you do not have to have too much faith to believe that that God could cause a flood that would flood the whole earth. So not only does Occam's razor point to a worldwide flood, not only does the evidence from fossils point to a worldwide flood, not only does the literature of ancient people point to the worldwide flood, I primarily believe there is a worldwide flood, or was a worldwide flood, because it is talked about in great detail in the book that I call the Holy Book. You may know it as the Holy Bible. It has a detailed story of a worldwide flood that says not only that it did happen, but it tells us why. So I am going to start this from the position that there was a worldwide flood. I'm going to start from that position as a given. I believe the Bible backs it up. I believe literature backs it up. I believe fossil records back it up. I believe the Occam's razor backs it up. So I feel very confident in telling you at one time there was a worldwide flood.